Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Monrovia Unified's Middle School Consolidation Community Information Meeting. Again, Dr. Paula Hart-Rodas, Superintendent here in Monrovia Unified. Again, we are thankful for your participation in this meeting, sharing with you the process that we are going through as we are in phase 2 of our fiscal stabilization process. A little bit about what today's meeting hopes to achieve, a very small overview of where we've already been in the fiscal stabilization process here in Monrovia Unified, an explanation of the best practices from the California Department of Education for school consolidation, and then sharing information on the data that guides the consolidation process, and then an opportunity to answer a few questions for clarification, and then connecting you to the input survey where we want to hear from you. Briefly, just to help bring you up to speed, Monrovia Unified entered into our fiscal stabilization process in January of 2024 when we received notice from LA County Office of Education after the submission of our first interim budget report, which required us to reduce our budget for the 25-26 school year by $3.2 million due to our deficit spending in the projected years. Our school board moved ahead and approved a fiscal stabilization plan that spring. Later that year, when we submitted our budget for the 25-26 school year, the 24-25 school year, the County Office of Ed reviewed that, and because of the additional deficit spending that was projected out, they required more cuts for not only the 24-25 school year and the 25-26, but even more cuts into the 26-27 school year, which brought our total reductions over that full period to be $6.2 million of reductions. Where that brought the school board and the district is that we had to enact a two-phase fiscal stabilization plan. The first phase, which the board voted on last December, in December of 2024, was the right sizing of our staffing and the consolidation of our Spanish dual immersion programs. What we did here is that we retained the sixth graders at the elementary schools. So now all 5 of our elementary schools are TK through 6. We right-sized our secondary staffing, which means that we made sure that our staffing numbers were in alignment with our enrollment numbers. It was something that we hadn't done for quite a number of years. As you know, the entire state of California is experiencing declining enrollment. We hadn't, as a district, made adjustments to our teaching staffing for over 10 years, and we were out of alignment in a high degree. So we released some teachers, we released some administrators, we made some reductions across other parts of our workforce and in some of our operating costs, and we were able to achieve approximately a $4 million reduction for this school year. But that was only phase 1 of the plan. Phase 2 is now where we're working. Phase 2 is consolidating middle schools, where we will move the students and the necessary staff onto a single campus, which will require likely a small reduction in force to ensure, again, that staffing ratio is appropriately aligned with the enrollment. It will likely require administrative and certificated staff, as well as classified support staff reduction. Until we know the enrollment and the appropriate ratios needed on that site, we won't know exactly what those numbers look like. The process to do this is driven by Education Code 41329. And the California Department of Education as well as the state attorney general, have provided a best practices guide as well as a legal guidance letter to help school districts who are facing this challenge. It's important to note that we are here as a district who is facing fiscal stabilization, which is a very different situation than a district that is in financial distress. Financial distress is a district who is so in such a fiscal disarray that they have either had to receive what's called an emergency apportionment, a loan from the state of California, just in order to make their budget work, or that has had an appointed manager either from the state or from the county come in to run their district. And that is where we were headed if our team and our board had not acted last year to stabilize our fiscal situation. Because of the work that our board did last year and the very difficult decisions that they made, we were able to stabilize and right the ship, if you will, and to maintain our fiscal stabilization plan and keep us from the county coming in and taking us over. As such, all of the work that we've been doing and that we're continuing to do this year is following the recommendations of the California Department of Education for transparency purposes. If we were in fiscal distress, the county and the state would come in and they would be requiring us to go through all of this work. So just to make sure that you understand that all of this work that we are doing voluntarily so that we can maintain transparency, and so we can include the community and the public in this work as we move through this consolidation process, because it is important to us, it is important to the board that our community is involved in this process as we move through it. Before we start talking about how the process works, I want everyone here who's listening and watching to understand that my team and the board, I want them to know that the board and my team understand how deeply personal and emotional this whole process is. We know that this is not simply open this and close this kind of process. Our schools, both of them, have been open in one form or another as an elementary school or a high school or some other permutation for almost 100 years. Right? We are the fourth oldest town in LA County. So we know how important both of these sites are to our community and to our families. We have generations of families that have gone to these schools, and that fact is not lost on any of us. So I want everyone here watching, listening, if you're listening to the recording or you're here with us today, that is not lost on the board. That is not lost on anyone on my team. Many of you have already heard my story. I went through this as a student myself. I have been in your seat. It is not a comfortable place to be. And so please understand, please know that we are approaching this with as much empathy and heart as possible, while also still trying to do a job that we were hired for. We have to be fiscally responsible, and there's simply no other way to get us to the space where we need to be as an organization and to be fiscally stable, except for us to consolidate these schools onto a single campus. And that's uncomfortable, and it's not an enjoyable process. And we are doing everything we know how to do and following this best practices guide. And we are here with you to be with you through this process. And so please, as we talk about this, we are doing so trying to keep emotion out of it as we're discussing facts, not because we do not care about what's happening within our community, but to be as objective as possible and to bring this to you in such a manner that is as unbiased as possible so that you can review the facts as objectively as you can and give us your feedback that way. I want you to know that, and my team and the board wants you to know that. I will get off my soapbox now. I did that without crying today, which is a bonus for me. Okay, so in the ed code, there are some required qualities or factors to compare when you are looking at which school would remain open and which property would get repurposed. So some of them are the condition of each facility, the operating costs of each facility, the capacity of each facility to accommodate excess students. And that's not as simple as just could you put more portables down, because there are things such as ratios of humans to facilities, like number of toilets, which was a ratio I didn't know was even a thing before we started this process. Number of people that can fit in a library or a cafeteria. Those things have to be able to expand. You need to consider whether or not special programs available at each school will or will not be retained. You need to account for transportation needs of students at each school, depending on which school, again, remains open, and what are the specific needs from the school of the students that need to get moved. You have to look at balance of student demographics, and you have to look at environmental factors in the neighborhoods of the school that remains open. And that's a very specific piece around things like walkability, pollution, crime statistics, proximity to things like factories, trains, businesses, pollutants, those sorts of things. You'll notice that some of these have a few asterisks because some of these are not impacting us as heavily because of our specific unique situation. One of them, the condition of each school facility, because if you've been paying attention to our board meetings recently, you know that our board has just voted to move forward with some modernization projects on a couple of our elementary schools and the as yet unnamed middle school for some work as early as this coming summer, the summer of 2026. So in terms of the condition of school facilities, some of those things are not, do not weigh as heavily because we've already committed as an organization to spend time and money modernizing whichever facility stays open as early as next summer. Retention of special programs. For example, both Clifton and Santa Fe have a dual immersion language program. Clifton has the Spanish program. Santa Fe has the Mandarin program. It is our intention and our promise that we're going to maintain those language programs no matter where we land. We have no intention of discontinuing those or any of our other programs. We will still have sports, we will still have art, we will still have drama, we will still have music wherever this lands. So that is not something that we're considering or that is going to factor largely into our decision about should it land here or should it land there, because in my cabinet, in our group, we're just picking up the kids and we're going to put them here or we're going to put them here. But we want to continue all of the really good work that we've been doing for all these years with our kids. With transportation, it is really, really important for us and for the board that we make sure that there are safe ways for all of our kids to get to school. And while I can't write a blank check because Dr. Giroux would get really upset with me, and so would the board, but we know that there are ways that we can work within our current system and still stay fiscally responsible to ensure that depending on whatever happens with this, that we can make sure that there are ways for our kids to get to school safely. And we're already exploring, depending on which way this happens, that there are, that we can account for ways, whether it's through our own means or through community means, that we can make things happen. With balance of demographics, that usually is a problem when you have 3 schools or more than 3 schools, where you have to close maybe only one school and you have to then split those kids out between multiple schools. But because we only have 2 schools and we're just grouping everybody together into one school, we don't have to worry about unequally dispersing any one population of our students. There will be no unequal distribution across multiple schools. Had we decided to perhaps close one elementary school and redistribute those kids to the other 4 schools, that might have been something where we would have to do an environmental impact study in terms of how we would equitably distribute certain demographics for our kids. But because we're literally bringing all kids together on a single middle school campus for next year, the balance of student demographics, including our special education students, our students, with disabilities, this really doesn't factor much into our decision of which campus it lands on, because everyone will just be together. So with that said, the next several slides, we're going to be showing you the comparability information. What we've gathered together over several months, and then we've already had a couple of meetings, so this has actually even evolved over the week as we've had great questions from our community. Information to help you make a comparison about the 2 facilities and what they have available to offer the future of our middle school. When we're done looking at data, before we get into questions, I do want to tell you just a little bit about like the next steps, or before we get into the data. So when we're done with all of this, it's not just, okay, there's the middle school, it's going to be at this site or that site. The way this whole process works is that we are collecting all of your feedback, and our team is working on, looking at all of this data as well. And we're collecting your feedback. And the ed code for 41329 requires that we take all your feedback and all of our information, and at the November board meeting, I have to stand up and say, dear board, taking all of this and all of our information, here's the recommendation, what we believe you should do, you should choose. You should choose to keep this school open and repurpose this campus for something else. At that meeting, the board is required to hear public comment on that, but they cannot make the decision then. They have to wait until a subsequent board meeting, which would be the December meeting, to make their decision. And at that meeting in December, they have to report out how they've incorporated all this comment that I'm going to ask you for in your survey, the comment that they hear at the November meeting. They have to report out in December how they've incorporated that input into their final decision. So it's a very long process. It's a very involved process. And then after they've made that decision, blank school is going to be where the middle school will be housed. It doesn't stop there. From January through June, then our team, in conjunction with the then 7th and 8th graders, the families, the staff, we are going to spend the next 6 months building the new culture of the new school. It's not as simple as it's this school or that school, and then the other kids just come over. No. We are going to spend the next 6 months creating the culture of the new space, right? The next 100 years of Monrovia middle schools, if you will. Right? It will be a community event, just like we did with when the dual immersion schools came together this year, just like we've done working with having the 6th graders. It is a very long process of bringing everyone together, which once the site is determined, then our teams will come together. So it doesn't end with just a decision. I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Okay, let's look at data. Just because want to show you, we've been digging. This is the 1973. We used to do this every year, apparently, before the advent of computers. And just is I'm a historical nerd. These are the documents. We used to produce this as a district every single year, talking about our district. Clifton Middle School, its original building was built in 1936, and Santa Fe Middle School was actually an elementary school when it was first built in 1948. So, as I said, both of them have been around for almost 100 years. Clifton, I believe, Santa Fe was converted to a middle school in the early 60s. I believe that's when it was converted. And the original, right? Thanks, Dr. Z. The original Spanish-style buildings were rebuilt back then. But you can see from this, each time the original concrete and wood frame buildings, concrete block, were modernized over and over and over again over time. It's just to give you history about how long we've been around. In looking at comparability of space available, so when we're looking at office space and availability of classrooms, you can see that the Clifton office is this is the office space, the main office area, just a little bit larger than the main office space at Santa Fe. There are 37 available classrooms at Clifton. There are 32 available classrooms at Santa Fe. There is one elevator at Clifton, and there are currently 0 elevators at Santa Fe. Important to note, at Clifton and Santa Fe does have the 1 2-story building in the office building, where there are 5 classrooms upstairs, and the only access to those is through a stairwell. There's no elevator to those upstairs. Where the elevator in Clifton is the elevator in the auditorium, the lift to get on the stage. Okay, moving on. Looking at facilities. Both schools have a gymnasium, but Santa Fe's gymnasium is much larger than Clifton's. Santa Fe's gymnasium holds 608 people, whereas Clifton's only holds 450. Clifton has a theater, which holds 650 people, and Santa Fe does not have an auditorium. I mean, I'm sorry, a theater auditorium. Libraries, they both have library facilities, and I'm going to say facilities. The library at Santa Fe is actually 2 classrooms, which we constructed a library out of, which was we took a wall down and we put some library stacks in, but it's not built as a library. And in both of those spaces, it's essentially the same thing. The capacity there is not an official capacity. We worked with the fire inspector. Typically, when you have, for example, in the gymnasium or the theater, that's an official fire inspector. They came through, they did all the measurements, and there's a sign on the wall that says this many people can be in here. For a library, when it's built in an architectural building, there's some very specific measurements. Since both of those rooms were not constructed originally as a library and have been since converted, they don't have that exact measurement. We don't have that. So we worked with the fire inspector to make an approximation. And then the square footages are there because they're both converted classroom spaces. So those are approximation with the help of the fire inspector, just to give you an idea. You can see that the Santa Fe space is larger than the Clifton space. So the same thing with the cafeteria, our official spaces. The Santa Fe cafeteria is larger than the Clifton cafeteria. Okay. Looking at restrooms, I mentioned these earlier, because the capacity to expand or have a facility grow is important because there is a ratio of toilets to people. And so it's not just how many bathrooms are there, but how many actual toilet facilities are there. So if there are 5 bathrooms, but each one only has 1 toilet versus there are 5 bathrooms and one site has 5 toilets in each and one site only has 2 toilets in each, that means that they don't have the same capacity to expand. So that's why we have listed it differently here in terms of how many stalls and how many urinals, etc., are in each restroom, so that you can see here. We also listed how many gender neutral spaces are available, because that is something that is legislated and it's important. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. And I should have mentioned this earlier. If you have questions, you don't understand something on a slide, please raise your hand or unmute and speak up, because I want to be able to answer it for you in the moment. I'm going to move on from bathrooms. We also have both drinking fountains and water bottle filling stations at each school site. And we have 5 drinking fountains at Clifton with 9 faucets, because we have several structures at Clifton that have multiple fountains on each. And at Santa Fe, we have 10 individual drinking fountain structures. We have 3 water bottle filling stations at Clifton and 2 filling stations at Santa Fe. Looking at the facility size, this is an overview of the Clifton facility. When we look at ingress and egress onto a campus, that's another consideration. So we have 4 pedestrian entrances, and the reason why we are classifying these is these are in conjunction with discussing with custodians and principals. These are the pedestrian entrances that we regularly use for ingress and egress onto campus, into and off of campus on a daily basis for kids and staff to come on and off every day. We do have on both campuses multiple other gates that maintenance uses for, getting equipment and things on and off campus, but those are not the ones that are regularly used for daily on and off. Also, probably are not ADA compliant, which we'll find out. We're in the middle of having an ADA assessment done. There are 3 drive entrances. Those are the big, large gates where we can get trucks and big equipment onto campus. There are 21 parking spaces available on our property. There's also street parking, but since we don't own the street, we're only eligible to say we have 21 available parking spaces. There is 5,500 square feet of shade availability, and that's defined as man-made designated seating areas. So that's shade structure that we have constructed that has designated places to sit. Certainly there's other shade areas, but this is space that's specifically designated to sit and eat lunch where it's shaded on this property. And looking at Santa Fe, again, there are 3 pedestrian entrances that are used with regularity for entrance into and off of campus. Again, there are also other multiple entrances for maintenance and etc. There are 2 drive entrances onto this campus. There are 44 parking spaces here, though, on our property, but also you can see there's lots of other neighborhood parking as well. There are 2,000 square feet of shade availability in their shade structure, where there is designated seating area here. In comparing field size, you can see that the fields are almost exactly the same, although they do have a different shape. The only other difference is that the Clifton field does have lighting, where the Santa Fe field does not. Santa Fe field has 2 ball backstops, and the Clifton Field only has one. Okay. In looking at our facility needs and eligibility for state funds, many of you are familiar with that giant binder and the facility needs assessment that was done for Measure MM. In an estimated cost of needs, the total amount of need at each school is, I'm going to say roughly the same because they're millions of dollars back in 2019. But this, correct, Dr. Giroux? These are current dollars, yes?
No, I apologize. I updated that these are 2019 dollars.
Okay. In 2019 dollars, Clifton needed $48.5 million worth of modernization, and Santa Fe needed $44.8 million worth of modernization. In our most recent 2025 eligibility analysis that the board just had done a couple months ago, Clifton is eligible for $3.8 million worth of modernization funds, and Santa Fe is eligible for $765,000 worth of modernization funds from the state modernization funds. So in terms of what the needs are versus what is eligible from state modernization funds that we can get, this was an ask from a previous meeting earlier this week, so we've added this. We know that in the 2019 dollars that our Dixon and Associates have advised us that it could be as much as a 25% increase in cost between 2019 and 2025. So, but there's no way to really know until you dug into those. So we left them as 2019 dollars because until you actually looked at what items you were really trying to address, it could be a 5% or it could be as high as a 25% increase in the cost of the actual items by the time you get to trying to fix them. So, but there's that comparability statistic there for you. However, the estimated eligibility, those are in today numbers. We took a look at operating costs because, again, that's one of the things that is required to look at. We took a whole school year's worth of gas, electric, and water, as well as custodial supplies. The enrollment at each school is listed there underneath the name. So this is last year when they had 6th, 7th, and 8th graders there. You can see that for the most part, the electricity and the gas are pretty close, right? And that's for the most part because whether I've got 15 students in a room or 30 students in a room, it's going to cost the same to keep the lights on and keep the room heated. Where we see a difference is in both the water and the custodial supplies. At Clifton, there's a little bit more grass. We saw the field is larger, but there's also less, or there's more water need at Clifton in landscaping because, and then there's more toilets getting flushed and those kinds of things because of the greater student population. But also at Santa Fe, because of the work from Amigos de los Rios, there's more water, drought-resistant landscaping, so it's more drought tolerant. So they don't need as much watering on some of their landscaping at Santa Fe. So there's some some differences there in their water needs, both because there's just not as many toilet flushing and etc. But there's also less watering. I see a hand from Mr. Lichtman. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, so it looks like you're comparing the schools as they're operated today. Maybe you get into it later, but I think I would expect you to compare the schools as they would operate as if they were combined, because I would expect things like custodial supplies to increase with the combined student population.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're doing last year, and then we're going to get to next year.
Got it. Okay.
For asking that question, I appreciate that. Yeah. So first, we're looking at last year to see how they compared. So yes, you can see that's a great point. You look at the custodial supplies, it's a whole lot less because less toilet paper, less hand washing, less all of those things. So the operating costs were different compared, not a whole, it's not huge, but you can see the roughly not quite 200 fewer students offset the cost. When we look at it this way, the cost per student, it looks looks more drastic. However, when we project out to next year based on our enrollment projections, we, like the state of California, are still in a little bit of a decline of roughly 1.5% to 2% students per year. So we're projecting our total enrollment together at whatever combined school to be about 692 to 700 students next year. So we're projecting our approximate cost per student next year to be about $354.61 per student. So you can see it's roughly about in the middle of what it was costing last year. So it's going to be a little more than what it cost us last year, based on some inflation figures for energy costs, etc. So to your point, Mr. Lookerman, yes, the larger overview of these two slides is in terms of it's not a large fiscal difference. Really, it's a few dollars. Really, it's not as though we have one school who's got solar and the other school is working on 1950s technology. Is really the point of these two slides. It's not as though the operating cost is pointing us to say, oh my gosh, this facility is operating so much more efficiently that it's crazy for us not to pick this school. That's really the point of this, is that it doesn't point us in any one direction, in our opinion. You make your own decision. But for us, it says it's not grossly unweighted in any one direction to us. But thank you for asking that question. Any other questions on this? Okay. Oh, I got a hand. It says Latoya.
Yes. So when looking at the numbers, will there be a reduction in inter-district student allowances? Do you anticipate that?
No.
Okay. I'm just thinking with, assuring that our students here in the district will have space, when they do, we intend on combining the schools because there's so many elementary schools. I just wanted to make sure we can accommodate the space for those students as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Dr. G is giving me lots of thumbs up here, so he's ready for that. Okay, moving on. Looking at operating costs again. We purposely didn't put actual dollar figures of salaries in here. This is really more just about staffing because it gets kind of complicated with seniority and years of service when we start talking about people and salaries. But just to give an overview of what staffing numbers look like, because this was requested earlier in the week. Last year, again, with the enrollment numbers there at the top, there were 2 administrators at each site. There were 26 teachers at Clifton and 18 at Santa Fe. And remember that teaching assignments is a direct ratio to number of students, as are counseling ratios. So that's why those numbers are there. Whereas the classified office managers, attendants, clerks, custodians, grounds crew are not related to student population. Right now, our human resources and business teams are working on some updated ratios that are much more accurate related to the actual facilities. And I don't know, I lost Dr. Landisfine or Dr. Giroux. if you guys wanted to speak to a little bit about that what you're working on. But
I can address it, Dr. Rodas. So, hi, Vanessa Landis-Fine. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Business Services and Human Resources are currently working together to establish consistent staffing ratios throughout the district. We already have required staffing ratios for our teachers, but we haven't done that kind of deep dive analysis on so, for example, how many custodians do we need if we increase the number of students at a school site? Right now, we're kind of like allocating the same numbers regardless of size. But obviously, if you have a much larger school, you should have more custodians to work with those students. So we're doing a deep dive into that for all of our schools right now to make sure that we're correctly staffed across the board and our students get the right amount of support for the size of the school.
thank you. So this is what we had last year. And what's important to note is that you may recall from a few slides back, when we right size our staffing, we only right size in the teaching arena. So with the exception of the half a counselor, these same numbers in terms of office manager, attendance clerk, custodians, and grounds crew, all of those same folks are still there this year. So there's still 3 custodians, 24 hours a week of grounds crew, an attendance clerk, and an office manager at Santa Fe and Clifton this year. Again, the only difference is that there's a half a counselor fewer at Clifton because there's fewer students. And there's 1 administrator fewer at each of the schools as well because there's fewer students. The teacher number is also different because that's directly tied to student enrollment. The last factor here, again, this is that last piece that has to do with community environmental factors. And this is about more the neighborhood where the schools are located. It's not about the students or the school itself. And these are the factors that we pulled this information from the City of Monrovia's Environmental Justice Memorandum that was produced the last one was produced in 2021. What's important to note about this is that a lower percentile is what's considered more favorable. So this covers things like pollution burden, disease, socioeconomic status, unemployment, housing burden, traffic density, all those different kinds of pieces. And we researched, what tract the schools reside in, and this is just pulled directly from the city's report. So the first 2 are the 2 specific characteristics, and then the bottom one, the third one, is sort of an overall. It's a composite of all. It's like a summary score. Mr. Lichtman.
Yeah, maybe you get into this later, but do you assess what you do with the property after it's potentially closed?
We do, yes. That is part of the survey, yeah, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that later. But yeah, definitely, that is part of what we're asking your input on. It is part of the process is that we are not allowed per CDE to just let it go to blight. We can't just let it sit there and rot. And that certainly would never be the board's intention. That's not what we would want to do with it either. But we do have in the survey, we are soliciting community input on, what do you think we should do with it? Because, I have my ideas. Dr. Giroux has his ideas as a lifelong Monrovian. Dr. Z has his ideas. The board, all 5 of them have their ideas. I'm sure all of you have ideas about what we could do. And that's part of what we need to do is solicit input. And while they don't have to decide that part by December, they do have to decide to do something with it. They can't just let it sit there. And that is a requirement of CDE is that we have to determine what to do, but not right away. Other questions, anyone? Yes, Christine.
Yeah, can you help clarify? So is this what environmental effect the schools have on the community, or their location and what they're exposed to because of the things that are around it?
Their location and what they're exposed to because of the surrounding community.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So at this point, that's the end of our data. And so this is a QR code to the survey. But if there are any other questions at this point, we're happy to answer them for you. Again, the decision is just the first step of this whole process. From here, it's the next 6 months of us co-constructing what this next middle school looks like. Sylvia, what's your question?
Hi, yes. So going back to the environmental impact,
Sure.
is any of the funding for modernization or renovation going to go towards the discrepancies in these numbers, or is that more like the city's job?
That's a great question. I mean, this is all information about the surrounding neighborhood. Certainly, things like upgrading our HVAC systems could address some of the pollution burden and things like that by making sure that our inside air is cleaner and things like that. We've already done a lot of work around safety, about creating safer campuses around the inside. Yeah, but there's not a great deal that we can do with modernization money to make our neighborhoods more safe. That's more work that we as a district do in partnership with our city in the other things like Safe Schools for All and the work we're already doing with the cities. That the city just got a grant on improving bike safety, and the project that they're already doing on improving traffic safety, things like that. Those will improve some of these metrics just citywide, not necessarily just around our schools.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Anyone else? Sylvia, and then Christine. Sylvia.
Sorry, I didn't realize my hand was still up.
Yes. Okay, Christine.
I may have missed this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but was it ever shown whether both sites or one or the other won't have the capacity to be able to meet the needs of the anticipated enrollment? Like, are both of them short potentially of accommodating the necessary toilets and classrooms and all of that, or would both be able to accommodate? I guess maybe I missed whether if there's a target number of okay, we want this number of toilets, we want this number of classrooms, and this is what we anticipate will meet the needs.
Oh, no, neither will, I can talk today. Neither are short of that. Both schools at one time have housed over 800 students.
Wow, that's great.
Anyone else? Christine.
Sorry, it's me again.
Oh,
I'm just thinking as far as a majority of, how do I want to phrase this? I'm just thinking of if there's been analysis of on the transportation side. I'm just thinking if Clifton stays open, if Clifton is the chosen middle school, does that lend it to have more walkers, more bikers, less bus needs because there's more of the population that is in that area, versus would it be a higher cost to bus more students from the northern part of Monrovia down to Santa Fe? Is that something that can be analyzed? I know it's kind of hard because you might have students who need to ride the bus now that wouldn't have otherwise. So you're kind of grasping at data that maybe isn't readily available, but I'm just kind of curious about that, if one or the other would provide a more significant transportation benefit.
Sure. One of the things that we've just sort of been talking about is looking at the current 6th and 7th graders and even just where their addresses are, right? And looking at what is their proximity to each school. And there's one of our instructional coaches helped us with this in the summertime, and to help us figure out proximity to the different summer campuses and how much our need for busing might be. And so we're going to use a similar process to look at what the transportation need might be, what it could be, before we even talk to families. Then we'll go out and look at like actually reaching out with families. We're going to look at where does everybody live, because it plots out. It's an application that plots out where everybody is in proximity and tells us the distances. And it's actually kind of cool.
Okay.
And
Okay, that's a,
yeah, where that lands, and then that gives us an idea of just where our folks are, at least for the immediate. And then that gives us an idea of what kinds of things we need to be thinking about. And from there, then we can start talking to, because we know that, for example, at Santa Fe, a great number of our kids walk to school, right? But they also live very close to Santa Fe. So now we might be asking them to walk, 1.5 miles, 2 miles, whatever the distance is, I'm forgetting right now. And I've made that walk before when the kids did the walkout last year, right? We made that walk, and it's not terrible, but I don't want to do it every day. I don't know. Who knows?
right.
So those are the things we're exploring and looking at, because that's what data for next year. But then what does it look like in 5 years?
Right.
We can't, because how much are we going to know? What do the kindergartners look like, and how much can we predict what it's going to look like from year to year? But we have to start somewhere. So we're going to start with next year's, like with the current 6th and 7th graders, to just give us an idea of like, what is the proximity to both sides?
Okay.
Start
Well, that makes sense, because as I was thinking of course you want to save the district money. That's what the whole point of this is, and to be fiscally responsible. But at the same time, the students who would have walked to Santa Fe were already eventually going to be burdened with needing to find other transportation to the high school.
Correct.
And so now from all of their time will be needing to travel further. There might be a time where, maybe it's Northern Monrovia drives down to Santa Fe for middle school and they drive to high school. And then, then the burden switches based off of the community of who's having the commute. Instead of having all of the students that maybe would have walked to Santa Fe, they get middle school down here and travel to high school. And
right. That's a great point. It's a trade-off, right? The northern half drives south for middle school, and then the southern half drives north for high school.
Yeah, just something to think about, but also wanting to be fiscally responsible. So that's why I just asked the question.
Write that
Thank
in
you.
your survey. Thank you for that. Pilar.
Yes, just something to consider. Is there some kind of study in the future which will be easier facility to expand if the need is required?
Yes and no. Just let me give you a little bit of perspective on the need to expand. Right now, as I mentioned, each school has been over or in Clifton's case, over 800 in their history. Right now, they're going to sit at just shy of 700. We would need to get over, in Santa Fe's case, over 800, probably 850 before we would have a need for more classrooms. We'd need to get over 1,000 students over 850 at Santa Fe, over 1,000 students at Clifton before we needed more classrooms. So that's, I mean, I wish we had that problem. Right, I agree, Marissa, that'd be an amazing problem to have. I didn't tell you guys my sob story, but my high school closed, and it was almost 17 years before they were able to open it, a second one back up again. And it took them almost 17 years to get another 800 kids. So if we can make that happen, we'll figure out how to open up another school again somehow, right? But yeah, that it takes almost a generation to regain that enough enrollment to reopen another space. We have, I believe, between both sites, on either site, sufficient space to accommodate the gradual enrollment as we continue, as we like eventually rebound. It typically happens in a very slow process. It's never, I mean, knock, just in case. It's never this big rebound. It's rarely seen that way. It's usually a very gradual as something that happens. But both of them have enough space for that gradual growth, and I think we've done a really good, and Dr. Landisfine has done a really great job of doing our enrollment projections for years out, and keeping an eye on birth rates and those kinds of things for us to be able to have our eye on the future and seeing as those things are coming up, for us to be able to pivot and make choices moving forward. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Well, if there are no other questions, my friends, then I want to thank you again for being here with us today. And we will, after the recording finishes finalizing, we'll have our public information officer post this to the fiscal stabilization page of our website so other folks can view this. And I welcome you to share that with them so that they can also take the survey. She'll also be sending out the slide deck and the survey information out for other people to see. And again, I just appreciate you, and please share this information with your neighbors and your friends, and we want as many voices as possible. And I cannot reiterate enough that we know how deeply personal this is, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that every voice is heard, and that that you have an opportunity to be aware of all the things involved in what's happening. And even after the decision is made, don't go away. We want your voice to be part of us co-constructing the next 100 years of Monrovia Middle Schools. So I'm going to stop the recording now so that you can say good evening, good afternoon. All right. Good afternoon, friends. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. I appreciate all of you. Thank you to my team. Thank you to our board members who are with us. Thank you to my colleagues and our community. I appreciate you. Have a good afternoon.